Hello everyone, so in this video we're going to talk more about cells. So there are two major kinds of cells. Two major kinds of cells in this class are referred as eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are like human cells, they contain a nucleus. Prokaryotic cells, they do not have a nucleus. And if you remember from the previous video, we saw a picture of the cheek cells with a blue staining nucleus on the inside, and then that staining dot on the inside was in the nucleus. And the word karyo refers to a seed, because the first people who looked at the cells, they thought it looked like it had a little seed on the inside, and they thought it must be important for something, which is correct. It is very important. So we'll talk about why prokaryotic cells were those. So the prokaryotic cells on the same slide that I showed you, the cheek cells, you can go back actually. So here, so this is the eukaryotic cells, and these little dots, these are bacteria, those are the prokaryotic cells, and this is the nucleus on the inside. So we have two major categories of the cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. And eukaryotic have nucleus, prokaryotic, they do not have nucleus, and we can divide those two. All the cells in this world, we can divide into those two categories that we have there. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of cell it is. There are some structures that are common to all cells. And I put all in capital here because there are no exceptions. So one thing that we'll talk about is plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is a structure that we see that surrounds the outside of a cell. I'll show you a picture in a minute. So it kind of contains the cell. So by some extent, if I highlight something in blue, that means it's important vocabulary term. Other ones are important too, but that's something we're going to discuss more about. So all cells, they have DNA, at least at some point. I know we mentioned that red blood cells do not have DNA, but they did have that at some point. All cells have structures called ribosomes, which we will mention briefly today and more in detail later. We'll also mention RNA proteins. So it's a different level of structure, but it is something that we do want to mention. All cells that have ever been discovered, they have RNA, and they also have proteins. And you're going to see that that's very important part of the cell. So all cells, they also have something called cytoplasm. That's kind of a liquid fluid part on the inside of the cell. It's not really a specific structure, but it's found on the inside. So here's a diagram of a cell. This is very generic cell, meaning they're trying to basically make a drawing that shows all the things that cell might have. So we mentioned the DNA, which is inside the nucleus. This is the nucleus here. So that's what we talked about already. And then the tiny dots here are the ribosomes. They're very hard to see, even on this picture. So you will not be able to see these with a microscope, regular light microscope. There are a lot of other structures here. There's the plasma membrane that's containing everything. So that's the plasma membrane there. And there is mitochondria that makes the energy. So it's an energy house, basically. Lysosomes, that's something we're going to discuss. There are lysosomes. There's a Golgi complex here. Looks like stacked pancakes. If you were to look at it, another view, I guess, but that's the Golgi apparatus. And there's endoplasmic reticulum, and that's rough. And then there is smooth. The rough, they have these dots on them, and the smooth, it doesn't have any dots on those. And those are ribosomes, basically, the dots. So we also have plant cell picture here. That's another type of eukaryotic cell, and we can see the nucleus there. So that's the nucleus in the center. And they are also eukaryotic, that because they have a nucleus, they also have a cell wall. So they also have additional cell wall that's part of the cell, and it's a rigid structure. And then on the inside, they have a plasma membrane here. So the other cell, it only had plasma membrane. This plant cell has plasma membrane, and it has the cell wall. So last one, you can say it's a human or animal kind of cell, and this is plant cell. They have the cell wall, which is important for their biology. Basic structure that we saw of the plasma membrane on the outside that's going to surround the cell is the plasma membrane. So that surrounds the cell. And then the fluid on the inside is cytoplasm, which I already mentioned. So I want to talk a little bit about the plasma membrane. So that's why I highlighted here is this is selectively permeable. There are barriers, meaning the most things they cannot get through. The word permeable means some things can get through. Selectively permeable means the cell can choose what it lets in. And most things that don't get through, which, it doesn't let most things go through the cell, which is good for the cell, because that means if it has food on the inside the cell, it's just not going to randomly leak out the cell and the food's going to go away. It needs that food. So it's going to hold on to that food or other molecules like DNA and proteins. So they can't just leak out in the environment. They stay inside the cell. So that's a good thing that there's a plasma membrane that kind of keeps everything contained. And the membrane is selectively permeable. So toxic molecules that might be bad for the cell, they might not be able to go through or get inside. So it lets them stay outside. Some molecules can get through. That has to do something with the size. So small molecules like water. Water is just 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen molecule. So that can get through the membrane. And most membranes, at least. So other thing is hydrophobic molecules. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about membrane structure, but the word hydrophobic means, hydro means water, phobic means like phobia or fear of or fearing. So it means water-fearing molecules. So the cell can get to choose what other things can get in or which things are going to be blocked. So it allows the cell to control what comes in and out of the cell. So if you can imagine the membrane like a big barrier or a fence, maybe imagine that there's a concert and you want to go in, but there's a big fence that doesn't allow you in easily. So you cannot get into the arena where the concert or the festival is taking place. But if you buy a ticket, you can show them the ticket at the gate and they will let you in through the gate. So the example here, the fence is basically keeping the people out from being able to go in or out easily. But by having these special gates, you can allow the people you want to go inside if they have a ticket. So you can let the people, pass through the gate if you want to. So the fence is analogous to the membrane. Some things that you cannot keep out, maybe mosquitoes, right? So the fence cannot keep mosquitoes out. They can just fly in and out. So in and out of the fence without any problems. So in this case, the membrane or the fence, we would consider it to be selectively permeable because the mosquitoes can go through, but the people cannot go through. So the festival organizers, they have the ability to let certain people in through the gate if they wish. So that's how cell works, basically, how membrane works. So here's the structure of a membrane. It's made out of something called lipids, which is basically fats. So certain kind of fats. Basically, that means most things cannot go into the fatty layer. Remember, oil and water, they do not mix. So things that like to be in water, they don't like to be in oil. So fatty parts like oil is kind of a fatty part, phospholipid. So oily or fatty is in the middle here. And so things like sugar, you cannot really dissolve much sugar in oil. So if the sugar is on the outside, it's gonna stay on the outside because it's not gonna go into the fatty part. So it's gonna stay where the water is. So that's basically a simple explanation that's good enough for this class. So however, the cells might really want that sugar to come in. Cells love to eat sugar. So if there's a channel that's gonna allow the sugar to come in, and the sugar is gonna float around on the outside, and it can come find that channel, and then it can come inside the cell. So that's like a gate in the music festival example. So whenever basically the gate is there, it says, okay, you have the ticket, you can come in, right? So now you can go through the gate and get on the other side of the fence. So that's what channels are for. They can allow glucose or other type of molecules that are bigger in size that cannot pass through the membrane to go in. So cells, if it needs other things, maybe other channels are going to be there. So it's gonna let maybe glucose to come in, fructose to come in, or other things that it needs through the gate, through the channels or the gates. So that's an example of a channel here. So phospholipids, we're talking about those various proteins. So those are the things that are embedded in here, like cholesterol. So the channel is kind of a protein that we'll talk about at different points of class. And then there's some things like cholesterol here. So cholesterol is part of human cell membrane. So you've heard about cholesterol, hopefully. Maybe you heard about bad cholesterol. So we'll talk about how bad cholesterol is, about that in detail later. But it turns out that our cholesterol is actually essential. So you must have cholesterol. And in fact, it's so important that your body makes most of your cholesterol. So you have cholesterol in your body, and any cholesterol that you eat, it doesn't have a real significant impact on how much cholesterol your body have. So the issue with cholesterol is really more about how your body's metabolizing fats. So in general, is you don't really have to worry about how much cholesterol you eat. So if you eat butter or if you eat eggs, those are fine in terms of cholesterol. But if they have saturated fats in them, like butter does, that can have a negative impact on your blood cholesterol levels. So I just want to point out that we usually have bad things about, maybe you heard about bad things about cholesterol, but it's actually essential molecule for your body. So I'm going to stop here for this video, and then we'll pick up talking about some different structures, starting with DNA in the next video.